Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this webinar on mastering M365 Copilot. The session is focusing on understanding AI security and privacy. My name is Jason Almeida. I'm a solution architect at Hitachi. I have the pleasure of speaking to you all today, and I'm joined by my colleague, David Reed. Over to you, David.
Hi, everyone. I'm David Reed. I'm a solution architect at Hitachi as well, and I focus on government customer solutions. Really nice to be speaking with you all today.
Excellent. Heads up, everyone, as you join, we're going to do a couple of polls because we'd like to sort of understand our audience a little bit more. So keep a lookout on those and do vote, please. It is anonymous, but it's just so we understand, everyone who's attended today. But in terms of our running order for the day, I want to focus and break down into two groups. First, focusing on the everyday public sector professional, all of you who've joined today. And then secondly, we want to focus on the IT admins and the digital leaders who have joined us today as well. And our objective today is to sort of understand how Copilot handles security and compliance and compare that to some of the tools available out in the market today. We want you to gain that understanding so you can be confident with how you use this in your day-to-day work. And from the couple of sessions we've done previously, we've picked out a number of audience questions. So we want to address some of those concerns to, make you guys more confident and ultimately give you some practical steps to take away in your day-to-day work. David, I'm happy for you to post the poll if you've got it ready. Awesome. So the first one, we just want to understand, what's your preferred AI tool for work? So yeah, please feel free to rate, and I'm going to submit mine as well. Give it a minute for or less for some of the responses. So it looks like we do have a fair few individuals using Copilot, which is an excellent start. Interesting, we've got a couple of Gemini and Claude users as well, but ChatGPT is still up there. David, I'll let that poll run in the background, and I'll have it open on my side, and I'll keep an eye to see if the numbers change. But let's move on for now. It should still. There we go. All right. So before we dive into security, I want to help you understand some of the varying tools and how they work, just to baseline the conversation. So first and foremost, looking at how do these AI tools work today? Oh, there we go. So at its core, an AI tool consists of a large language model, which is the AI brain, if you will. And if you started with asking a simple question of, what can you help me with? It's going to use that brain to respond. If you ask it a question around, what's the weather like today? It might leverage the internet to get some of that information, part of its AI brain in this approximation, and then respond to you. And then finally, in the context of work, if you're trying to think about how am I going to deal with this resident inquiry, and I need to provide some information about the context, and then it gets the response, you might typically put in some work context or document before it gives you some of these responses. So those are roughly the three areas that kind of drive its way of responding. Now that you understand, how they work at its base, there are several tools in the market, and we've seen from the responses, ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini, etc. And when we look at Copilot specifically, there are two versions for those of you who may not know. There are slight subtle differences in these variants, and I'll quickly cover these. The first one is Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat, and the second is Copilot. The primary difference between the one on the left is that it's free, whereas the one on the right is that it's paid version with additional features. They both include full access to chat capabilities with image and file upload, etc. The main difference that I mentioned is that the free version includes that large language model and web data only, those first two boxes, whereas the Copilot paid version automatically has a connection to all of your work, emails, files, context, meetings, etc., to then give you much richer responses. Now, on the free version, you can still update, upload work documents in a secure fashion, and we'll touch on that in a moment as well. So you can still roughly achieve it, but without the same native capabilities. So I'm going to pause there for one more poll, just to understand from a security standpoint, what's your sentiment towards, its understanding as well? So, David, feel free to drop that in the chat. Thank you very much. And let's give it a 30-second to see how people are responding to this. Cool, an even split, looking like it. Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to move on, but thank you very much for those responses. I do really appreciate it. Really helps us baseline what we're going to talk about further down the line. So let me start with understanding the importance of security and privacy. Now, at its core, it's about the sensitive data that we might handle within a public sector context, such as citizen records, policy documents, etc. And they need to be treated with the same level of caution, because we want to make sure there's no unauthorized access to them. We need to make sure we comply with any regulatory requirements, and that might be at a national level, such as GDPR, or at an organizational level where your work might have controls in place. We want to be ethical with how we use AI, and that includes, making sure that we don't or minimize bias, make sure things are fair, make sure things are accountable when we use these tools, and how we are transparent about their use as well. And then finally, all of this drives our trust and building trust in public and their confidence with how we handle their data. So doing the three below is important to ensure that the top one is maintained. So if I can look at how these tools compare from a security standpoint. Now, what I've got here is I'm comparing consumer grade tools versus enterprise, and the reason is because it's a fair representation, purely because for the average individual and those working in public sector, you're looking at how you can accelerate your work, and in order to do this, you might sign up to one of these tools, but the security implications might go unnoticed. So looking at these pillars in the middle and looking at things like data location and privacy, access and identity control, monitoring, security measures, and governance and compliance. Now, when I compare the two really briefly, first and foremost, when you're using consumer grade tools, they don't sit within the boundary of your work. They might leave it, and you may not have any control over that, and it might be stored or shared. That isn't the case with enterprise tools. From an identity and access control, you might sign in with a personal Gmail account, which is what ChatGPT uses, at least the free version or even the paid version. There is an enterprise version as well, which we'll briefly touch upon. But in the context of M365 Copilot, you're always using your work account. This one's a really important one. With consumer grade tools, even the paid ones, there's no guarantee that the data you put in may not be used for improving services, improving the model, training the model, etc. Whereas within Copilot, there's a guarantee that this does not happen, and that is part of the enterprise data protection standards. From a security measures standpoint, a consumer tool may not have all of the security measures that an IT infosec team might require, and there's limited IT security control features as well. Whereas, again, in the enterprise space, you might typically want data encryption to make sure that no one can access the data while things are in transit. You want to make sure that no one can access some of the chat that you may have shared as well, or sharing is controlled. And this, finally, with governance compliance, with a consumer grade tool, you may not be able to control things like sensitivity labels, handling data loss, or auditing who's using it, how much they're using it, etc. Whereas in an enterprise tool, you have all of these controls. As I said, folks, if you've got any questions, please do pop them into the Q&A, and we've got a team who can keep an eye and moderate the chat accordingly. So focusing a little bit more and looking at the two tools we've compared, and looking more specifically at the popular one, ChatGPT, and looking at how it compares from a security standpoint. Now, the main things to call out is, regardless of the version of Copilot that you have, you get the same level of security. Okay, so that's the enterprise data protection, which focuses on ensuring secure, private, controlled access, copyright protection, and no training as well. Whereas with ChatGPT, you may not have that. There's no IT management, as I've mentioned, and you would have seen this world of agents now coming up into the fold, where you might create them in ChatGPT or Copilot, and you don't have control within ChatGPT, whereas you do have IT oversight within Copilot. And finally, the paid version has some more advanced SharePoint features, if you're trying to manage what documents are accessible as well, which is probably the only additional in the paid version. So now that I've sort of given you a baseline in terms of the capabilities, let's go into the foundations of how Copilot works from a security standpoint, and then go into giving you some practical tips. So at its core, as I've said before, data never leaves the tenant or is used to train models, and that is Microsoft's guarantee. The three pillars I've got is that, first of all, your identity and data are protected. You sign in with your work account. Any security rules that your work has set today will apply when they switch on Copilot. There are some additional features you can enable, which we'll get to in a moment. And data does remain within the Microsoft Cloud, within your work and geographical boundary. Now, from an aspect of what Copilot can see, if you can access this document today or tomorrow, that's the same as Copilot will be able to do. It doesn't have any additional access over and above what you can do today. From a paid version, you do get access to all of your work context that I mentioned earlier. That's probably the only difference. But finally, any prompts or responses you put in are protected and they are private to you. And then finally, the compliance and privacy protections that I mentioned earlier, it does respect things like sensitivity labels, which I'll show you in a second, and it complies with all of the core standards. And that's Microsoft's commitment towards sort of organizational policies as well. And there are additional controls that you can put in place. Cool. So in terms of I've shown you what it does. Now, talking about briefly about the how, there is what they call the Copilot control system, which consists of security and governance control, management controls, and measurement and observability. And there are several tools within the Microsoft 365 stack that you can leverage to enable these controls, although some of them do get enabled as standard, and it's on the IT admin team to kind of ensure you have the specific configurations required for your organization. But as I said, the EDP or Enterprise Data Protection still applies. Cool. Now, finally, I'm going to go on to, for all of them, all of you attended today, looking at how can I take away some useful considerations, tips and tricks that I can sort of pass on to my colleagues. I've got a set of considerations or things to take away to allay any concerns. And these are across these groupings that I've created, all based on some of the conversations and the questions we got asked over the last couple of webinars. So let's start with privacy. Now, some of the questions we got asked was, can my IT manager see my chats? The answer, in short, is no. Are searches private? In short, yes. Does Copilot share information with a third party? Absolutely not. So go into a bit more detail. Your chats are absolutely private to you. Currently, you cannot share chats with other people, although from a product standpoint, that may change from Microsoft. So there is a consideration which to bear in mind when you're sharing some of these chats, but they are probably going to be chat threads. That's something we'll have to keep an eye on. Any responses that you create, so let's say you're having a long conversation with Copilot, as you can see here, there's a little icon there that says that this has been exported to a document. Now, you can do this, so you do need to be aware of how you then share those documents, because that's the Copilot generated content. So that's a consideration for you when you're sharing this or adding people to documents or pages and things like that. If I click through onto the next slide. So looking at chat sensitivity, let me just see. So looking at chat sensitivity, some of the questions we got asked is, can I rely on Copilot in a high security setting? Now, the answer on this one is it depends. But what's important is that you do have the capability within the platform that's already enabled as standard. So you may have seen on your documents these low sensitivity labels that get attached to them. Now, if you bring in a document like I did here to bring in our security webinar, it's got a internal customer sensitivity label. So that label gets automatically carried into Copilot and any downstream document. So you can have confidence that it's not forgetting that privacy label. So if your organization has, let's say, a confidential label and it says you can use it in Copilot, you can ensure that it will get carried through. There might be a scenario where they might say, highly confidential documents cannot be used, and there is controls for that as well. And that comes in through the data loss prevention policies as well. So if you have an IT InfoSec team, give them a shout and you can make that recommendation to them. Now, one of the things you do need to care about, consider as well, is how much information you share or how many documents you share as well. So bear that in mind. I'll get to that when we're talking about documents, files, and emails. You can see here, even when you're using an image generator as well, if you add a document that has a sensitivity label, it will give you a notification to say that be mindful that you're adding sensitive documents to this image generation tool, and you need to consider how you share those downstream images with people. The core is that respects the rules based on the documents that are been pulled into the conversation. Cool. Now, there were a couple of questions around, can we train Copilot to remember things such as spellings? And does Copilot remember what you put into it? Now, if you think back to the first one around chat privacy, Copilot does keep a history of your conversation threads, so you can always go back to them. I know I do all the time. So that's only private to you, but it does keep a list of conversations for you to review. Now, when will it remember specific things? It doesn't learn from your prompts or your responses. So each conversation is an independent unit. So when you start a new conversation, it's like starting afresh. There is an asterisk to this. I'll get to that in a second. And it doesn't store any data for future use as well. So as I said, you've got the conversations, but let's say you wanted to respond in a particular way or behave in a particular way or remember certain things. There are two things you can configure within your Copilot, and that is your memory and your Copilot response style. So memory is you telling it to remember certain things explicitly, and you can always go in and manage and delete these if you change your mind in the future. If you want Copilot to respond in particular ways, so always be factual, use bullet points, use UK-based spelling, for example, you can do that in its custom instructions so that it can remember these things. So those are the two things that you have complete control over, and that's something you do as an individual. So I'd urge you to go into your Copilot and see if you can, it's in the settings area that you can turn this on and then manage how it responds to you in a better fashion. Again, these two things that you put in is not used to train, and nobody else has access to them. So you can be confident in the fact that it's only to you. Although I think I've shared my custom responses with my colleagues because I think it's a certain way we like to work. Moving on to documents. Now, there were questions around, does Copilot share uploads? Short answer is no. If you put a document into Copilot, it is within that atomic chat that you have and nowhere else. Can Copilot access potentially unauthorized documents? Now, for this one, it's a slightly nuanced answer. You would have seen the share button on your documents that you would have previously been clicking on, and you may have previously seen there's an option to share it with everyone in this organization. Now, if this document is shared with everyone in this organization, when you ask Copilot a question, it will respond with finding any document that it has access to. So the key here is to make sure that you are not oversharing documents and sharing it with the people who you think need access to this document. The core is, if you don't have access to the document naturally, Copilot can't access it either. It's just that because it's a digital tool, it can very quickly find everything it has that you as an individual have access to. So that's something to bear in mind when you share things. And I know me personally, I've changed the way I share documents. Now, in the background here, there's a little, so you can see here, when you add a chat, you can bring in documents into context, and by using the / button. In the free version, you'd have to manually pull them in, whereas in the paid version, it automatically does it for you, and you've got a bit more control. But again, these are you specifically adding documents into Copilot that you already have access to. And finally, looking from a compliance perspective, how does Copilot work with data laws? And so for this, given that it's a Microsoft product, it automatically complies with the laws I've mentioned previously. And there's another question around, can the IT team access our chats? The answer is no. They can observe the number, the frequency, and if there are any not suitable content being used within Copilot, that can get flagged by the Copilot's parent system, in which case it will show the prompt, but not the actual content. Equally, your IT team can configure certain rules to ensure that sensitive projects, sensitive labels are not processed at all by Copilot. So if you, for example, on here, ask a question about a particular project, it says, I don't know the answer to that because I'm not allowed to do so. And that's a Copilot control that you can enable. But all of this is driven through a technology called Microsoft Purview and Microsoft 365 Compliance Manager to ensure that these rules are adhered to. David, I believe it's over to yourself.
All right, so thank you, Jason. So that's really useful. So this really section is really talking about, now as we're going to embrace AI tools like Microsoft 365 Copilot, it's really vital to balance innovation with our responsibilities. So it isn't just a technical challenge, it's an ethical and a regulatory one. And since Copilot is designed to accelerate productivity, it must do so in a way that protects people, data and public trust, particularly if we're working in public sector or services or policing, councils and so on. We need to make sure that anything we use Copilot for is going to be used responsibly. So Microsoft has, for many years, had a responsible AI standard, which underpins everything that Copilot does, and a lot of the whole tech stack that Microsoft has built on top of AI capabilities. So there are 6 principles in the responsible AI standard: fairness, reliability, and safety, and so on, inclusiveness, transparency, accountability, as you can see here. But these principles are operationalized in Copilot. For example, Copilot respects your existing permissions and sensitivity labels, so it's only surfacing information and content that you're authorized to see, as Jason was saying. So any prompts and responses are processed inside the Microsoft 365 service boundary, encrypted at rest and in transit, and never used to train models. And as for transparency, Copilot provides citations so you can verify the sources of information it's gathered for the response. And every interaction is logged for audit and e-discovery, ensuring accountability. Now, these principles align to major regulations such as the EU AI Act, which calls for risk-based controls, transparency, and human oversight. And also for us in the UK, the UK Data Protection Act and GDPR are supported through data residency commitments, retention policies, contractual guarantees that your data isn't used to train the models. But also, it's very relevant because in the UK, we've got this playbook for use of artificial intelligence in government. And that has a set of 10 principles, which align very well to what Copilot principles are as well. So again, it's the main themes of those are protecting sensitive information, maintaining data sovereignty, preventing bias, ensuring auditability, and keeping meaningful human control. All of those things you can do within Copilot, and also the guardrails that are provided by the Microsoft platform, which we'll talk about in more detail in the security section for IT admins. And the final point I really want to mention on this slide is because at Hitachi Solutions, we typically work in a human-centered approach with our government customers. And our user research team recently was working with government teams to help uncover their real concerns, such as fear of data leaks, cultural resistance, uncertainty about compliance. And as a team, we address these through inclusive design workshops with role-based training and governance frameworks, which were tailored for public sector needs. So if you want to know more about that research work and how we were working with government to help with adoption of AI, you can go to this QR code and you'll see a blog on the work that we've been doing there. So Jason, do you want to talk on this about our offerings in this area?
Oh, yeah. So really quickly, if you're looking at adopting and starting your journey with Microsoft 365 Copilot, we've got an offering and capability to help drive organizational adoption and day-to-day use to change the way you work. Equally, if you're looking at enterprise AI governance and ensuring oversight, management, observability, and security of your AI estate, and that applies not only just within Copilot, but AI in general. We've got a specific capability as well. So that's all I'm going to say on that point, David. So feel free to reach out to us, and I'll pass it back over to you.
Brilliant. Well, we're going to take a short interactive Q&A break just to kind of look at any of the questions that have been coming up in the Q&A so far. So, and then after that, we'll move into a more detailed security section covering a lot of the controls and tools that are available to help manage Copilot. So feel free to pop any questions in the Q&A. I will endeavour to get those published and answer those as soon as possible.
Yeah. David, shall we take it one at a time? And I'll start from the top. So we've got a question around, can this be downloaded onto a work laptop? Or is there something, as we already have Microsoft 365? So answer is yes, you can download the M365 Copilot app. I have as well. So I use that on my desktop. You can also use this on, I think if you go to office.com, it redirects you to Copilot. So you can go on the web as well. The experience is almost exactly the same. You can also use it in Microsoft Teams as well if you add the app there. So 3 options for you to choose from. So yeah. Next question. Is there a way to delete conversations in bulk rather than one by one? It's a good question. I believe you can only do it one by one at the moment. There is a mention from Microsoft that they're looking for better management within the My Account settings. But as far as I know, it's only one by one at the moment. Next one. Okay, it's muted. Can you stop organization users from accessing the web/open version of Copilot that is not secure and needs a private email to log in? And configure this currently, or would you, or would this impact on the enterprise version access? So, interestingly, if on my work laptop, I've got the consumer version of Copilot as well. And because I've got M365 Copilot, it automatically redirects you to the enterprise version as standard. That needs a private email to log in. So I guess this might be a slightly nuanced answer we might have to take on offline, because if you've got a personal laptop that you've signed in there, that might change the setup a little bit. And yeah, I think it's a slightly longer question because it'll also rely on how your devices are managed, etc. But there are controls that you could leverage from Intune, etc., to make sure that if someone is using work-related Copilot on a device, an organization can control and manage it. What's the difference between using Copilot free on my council laptop versus my work laptop? So if you're using this on your private laptop with a personal login, you are effectively looking at, the free version with just the LLM brain plus your web grounding to so it's, think of it as an exact ChatGPT replica with Microsoft's capability thrown into the mix. If you're using it on your council version, also typically the free version won't have the same enterprise data protection, but that's not the purpose of this webinar. On a council laptop, the free version will have the EDP protection. You will notice the little shield sign on your Copilot app in the upper right corner. Is it safe to leave people's information such as names, email addresses in the content put through Copilot? So that's a very good question. So Dave, feel free to chime in on this one. This will depend on your organization's policies. You can configure it to automatically obfuscate any PII type information. This is driven through Microsoft Purview. So this is something you will have to ask your IT admin team to ensure they've got set up correctly, to ensure that this doesn't you don't breach any of your internal policies, etc. Although, as I said earlier, Microsoft's enterprise data protection ensures that this is never shared, it's never used for training, etc. So you still have some level of peace of mind.
Yes, so just on that, we'll talk a little bit more about that in the security section, but there's very fine-grained control over what you can allow as part of the response. So it's very comprehensive.
There's a good one here. Can this be used securely for note-taking during a meeting where confidential information may be discussed? So if you think back to the confidential projects that I've shown a screenshot of where Copilot doesn't assess any of that, and some of the sensitivity labels that I talked about. So if you're having a sensitive meeting or a confidential meeting, you can choose to use Copilot to transcribe it, and it will adhere to any policies your organization has defined, but you will have to check with your IT team first. The capability is there. You just want to make sure that you're complying with whatever policy your organization has in place. Can I share a private document with Copilot to summarize key points? And no, that will not be shared. Okay, so this one, prime example, yes, if it's a private document that you've created, let's say it's a strategy document that you're authoring and you want to be able to summarize it to share with someone, you can use Copilot to summarize that document. The document will, I assume you've not shared it with people. The chat will not be shared with anybody. The summary you can then put out into a document and share with somebody if you choose to do so. So the first 2 points will ensure that you have the necessary privacy you want. Okay, I'll do the last one and then we'll move on, I think, in terms of time. If Copilot can modify files we upload, will those modifications be tagged as AI edits or username edits, and how will be one? This is a good one. So Copilot won't edit any documents without your explicit say-so. It is very much firmly in the assistant territory, not an autonomous agent. There are capabilities coming where it can start editing documents, and you will already see that when you hover over text, it will show you a little Copilot sign to show that it's been Copilot generated. So you do have that visibility at this current point in time. But in terms of editing documents without your knowledge, that doesn't happen as it currently stands. There is elements coming in the future, but that's a Microsoft product question. Cool. I think I'm going to pause at this point and hand over to you, David, to cover the next section.
Yes, some really good questions there. So I think we'll spend a bit more time answering those in the background. So what I'll go is, I think if we move on to the next section, we'll have about 10 minutes to go through this, and then a further, more detailed Q&A session at the end. So again, if you've got further questions, we will be answering them throughout up until the end of the hour that we've sort of allocated for this. So this section, we're going to cover more detail on data security, privacy, observability, and compliance. And we're going to look a little bit again about the security controls that are available to help. Everything that you use within Copilot and Microsoft 365 runs within the service boundary. So that includes the Azure AI models that are used by Copilot, and also the apps and Copilot itself. So they're all sitting within that service boundary. That's where Microsoft is running the service. And for UK customers, as of the end of November, Microsoft has guaranteed that those will run within UK data centers, provided that's where their main tenant is, for example. Now, the tenant idea is probably a bit of a new idea to some people, but really it's just where you log in, where you get your identity. So Microsoft Enter ID, your login credentials, and so on, is basically your tenant. And within that, you'll have, or IT admins will have controls such as the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, Purview, and Power Platform Admin Center. These all form part of, or the Copilot control system uses these as some of its elements to control the way that Copilot can be used within your environment. And it's important to note that data is really the foundation of everything. The data that you use for Copilot when using Copilot internally for Microsoft 365 chat or within any of your Microsoft 365 apps can ground its responses on data that you have access to yourself. So that data can be data that you use and own in SharePoint, OneDrive, Exchange, Teams, Dataverse if you're using the Power Platform or Dynamics, or the Microsoft Graph, which is basically your neighborhood of resources that you are in contact with, which can include Teams meetings and chats and those kind of things. Okay. Now, there are a number of controls over this. So Purview will provide access such as labeling, data loss prevention policies, retention policies, but also if you're using SharePoint a lot, and we get many customers that come to us because they're using SharePoint extensively and they don't know quite where to start because they don't have policies in place. There's a capability called SharePoint Advanced Management, which was mentioned earlier, which provides the ability to quickly set up restricted access controls or restricted content discovery, so you can find where there might be some potential oversharing issues. So again, those are the controls that are available. So on top of those basic foundation controls, the Copilot control system provides the policies that sit on top of it, the safety filters. There's some questions about content safety earlier in the chat. But basically, Copilot will filter any content that is going to, any questions, as well as any content that's responded as part of the response, based on safety filters to reduce the possibility of people using this for inappropriate purposes. And also it will allow you to set up which apps are allowed, people are allowed to use, which controls people are allowed to use, and also metering and quotas for usage, for example. And then on top of that, the Copilot and agents runtime will actually serve the prompts. There are a couple of agents that come with Microsoft's 365 out of the box, such as the research agent or the analyst agent. So again, those are examples of very specific types of Copilot service that will answer specific questions. And you can create your own agents, but that'll be outside the scope of today's topic for conversation. But having just mentioned it, if you are getting into realms of developing your own agents, there is a tool coming from Microsoft. It's already available in the Frontier program called Agent 365. So you'll hear a lot more about that early next year. And we're planning to have a follow-up webinar on that topic for those that want to get into managing agents in a secure and controlled manner. So data security, the first thing you need to know is before enabling Copilot is about Microsoft's Purview's data security posture management, which basically provides an X-ray on your environment. It scans across SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams to find potential risky, sensitive data or oversharing risks. And once identified, it will help you apply sensitivity labels. Those will be things like, for government, things like official sensitive, or official type labels, or not to be shared. But we know that many departments do actually work together. For example, if DVSA will work with DVLA, DWP might be working with HMRC, for example, local government might be working with MHCLG, and you need to share documents not just within your own tenant, but potentially with your business partners. So again, you can label documents that you're happy to share with your business partners across government in a certain way, so that you know that they're safe for sharing beyond your tenant boundary, but not something that you want to go beyond your business partner boundary, for example. And those labels will be carried with those documents, but also will be visible in any prompts and responses that use those documents. So they'll bubble up within that. Here's a view of what the security posture management tool looks like for admins. So you can see a number of things that can be set up within it, such as blocked labels, blocked queries, and so on. And you can get visibility of everything that's going on within your estate. Okay. So what does it actually do to help? It just gives visibility before Copilot starts interacting with your data, so you can remediate oversharing and classify sensitive content. And it's a proactive step that you do at the beginning to enable and ensure that Copilot is secure and well governed and gives you the right foundation for getting started. So then moving on to data privacy, we've talked a little bit about labeling here. So for things like official or for documents that are only for HR, for example, CVs and those kind of things. You can apply data loss prevention policies to ensure that you can block or mask sensitive outputs, like as was asked earlier, sensitive outputs like credit card numbers, personnel numbers, identifiers, dates of birth, and those kind of things, where you don't want to have that information shared as part of a prompt or response. And also, on top of this, SharePoint Advanced Management can further restrict Copilot's scope during early rollout. So how do we make sure Copilot doesn't expose confidential or sensitive information to the wrong people? Well, this we can do by combining Purview labels with DLP and SharePoint Advanced Management. Labels enforce encryption and access rules. DLP prevents risky outputs, and SharePoint Advanced Management will limit what Copilot can index. And together they all work to ensure that Copilot amplifies the good and doesn't emphasize anything that might not be, you might not want to be visible, for example. Okay, and then the third thing really is observability or transparency, which builds trust. So Copilot isn't a black box. Every interaction is auditable, and audit logs capture prompts and responses. So if there's a concern, you can review what's happened. So quite often, those will happen in the background and there'll be no concern, no need to go and investigate. But where an investigation is required, you will, for compliance reasons, need to be able to surface what exactly was used. For example, there might need to be evidence for someone who's been repeatedly trying to leak information or violating policy and those kind of things. So some of those pieces of evidence will be within the audit logs, which will be securely managed within Microsoft Purview. So the AI Hub integrates with audit logs for full visibility, so you can see what's going on, what the risks are, and so on. Now, it doesn't give you the tools to do blocking specifically, but the blocking of particular things will be done through the other compliance tools that we'll talk about in a moment. Okay, and the last bit here is about compliance and governance alignment. So compliance, of course, is critical, especially for government and emergency services. The good news is that Copilot fits into your existing compliance framework. Microsoft Purview Compliance Manager will map your deployment against standards like GDPR, the UK Data Protection Act, and it shows which controls are met and where gaps exist, with improvement actions to close the gaps. So the question we had from before was, how do we ensure compliance with UK official? So we can do that with using these tools. So again, by setting up the labeling policies and making sure that we've got the right governance in place, we can make sure that we comply with the right regulations and make sure that any documents that we are working on or prompts that are using those documents also comply with UK official, for example. So again, everything that is set in your foundational policies percolates up into Copilot to ensure that everything is compliant. So secure adoption of Copilot, of course, is a journey. So we have to start with the foundational steps, enable audit logging, apply sensitivity labels, and set the data loss prevention rules, and enforce conditional access for people that are using Copilot on their devices. And then what we need to do then is go from that foundational setup to a more advanced and optimized setup. So again, to get there are additional things that we will want to do. So once you've got the foundations right, you can now configure AI-aware guardrails, create your DLP policies, apply the sensitivity labels to the different areas. That can include SharePoint repositories, documents, and so on. So anything that's going to be a source that people will use around them for documents or for prompts that they are putting into Copilot, for example. And then your responsibility really as an IT admin is to monitor, investigate, and respond to any AI risk. So again, using tools like Purview, you'll be able to see what's going on in your environment, enable insider risk management for AI, and investigate any incidents and fulfill your legal or FY duties to follow up on any potential misuse within your organization. And through all of this, we need to tie it back to the UK government guidance. So make sure that we're following the controls that align to the playbook themes, but also the ones that will apply potentially to us, like the EU AI Act or the UK Data Protection Act, for example, and make sure that we're building a responsible environment, IT environment for people to use Copilot and mature through the journey to get to an optimized level of control. So the question really we get from some customers is, how long will it take to go on this journey? And that will depend often on your level of maturity already. So if you've already got some of the baseline with Purview, then it can take just a few weeks to get up and running with some initial Copilot activity. And we can offer some tangible next steps to getting you up and running with that. And the other question we get asked sometimes is Microsoft E5 licensing required for all of this? Well, many of these controls at the left-hand side can be managed through E3, and E5 just adds some extra automation around some of the controls, some extra level of detail and risk management for some of it. But there's definitely some areas where we can help optimize your licensing just to look at what's going to be the most efficient for you for helping roll out Copilot. Okay. And so with that, we're coming to the end of the main time of the presentation. So now we've got some further time for Q&A. So hopefully so far this has been of use. It's given you some insight into the controls available, and we'll jump into the Q&A now to help answer any further questions.
Yeah, David, there were a couple more that's come in.
Okay.
So probably just work it from the top.
Are they in review?
Published.
Published. Okay, cool.
Yep.
IT department has set retention to 5 days. Does that mean chats will disappear after that time? Okay, might need to go into a little bit more detail about which retention they have set, because there might be multiple retentions, but there could be a retention for chats, in which case, yes, if you're using the like create new chat and you try and go through the history of your chats, then they may disappear. It sounds quite short to me, so we'll have to let's find out a bit more about your scenario and why they've chosen that specific number.
Yeah.
Can Copilot be used securely for taking notes during meetings? Did we talk about this before?
Yeah, we covered that one before.
Okay. Can we remove pre-built plugins within Copilot? Is that one answered already?
I don't believe
okay.
so.
So there is so this may be sort of veering into the more advanced areas such as agents and so on. So Copilot will do um, is mainly kind of built around that chat interface, but also embedded within the things like Teams and Office documents, Office tools like Word, Excel, and so on. And its behavior is very much geared around standard behavior within those tools. You can extend Copilot with connectors and other data sources and knowledge. But it might be useful to know specifically what area you were thinking.
Yeah, I agree. I think as the core Copilot, it will probably be built and operate as is, mainly to ensure security and compliance from end to end. There may be more custom scenarios that they're thinking of, perhaps, but yeah.
Okay.
I think
Yeah, there's a new one that's come in at the top. If we are beginning to implement document labeling, is there a DLP rule that can be enabled to prevent sharing of information for documents without a label? No, I think this is where SharePoint Advanced Management comes in. I think there is an initial way you can set that up, where you can kind of say, for now, we're going to automatically protect anything that has not been labeled. But ideally, what you want to do is, go down the labeling route, and maybe give it a general classification. The other thing is probably to set your SharePoint access so that by default, anything that has not been properly labeled isn't used except by the author who has access. But they can't then see other sites which they didn't author, for example. So there may be some rules that can be applied there as you set it up. But again, if you've got a specific scenario, we can help you work through that. And the idea of all of these is to make sure that you can ensure you can roll out Copilot
yeah,
in an easy way.
cool. Yeah, I think that's there. I know we've probably got a couple more questions, but in the interest of time, and yeah, we're a little bit out. So I do appreciate everyone who's hung about for 10 extra minutes. We'll take some of these questions away and we'll respond separately if that's okay. Dave, if you just want to click through on the next slide, please. So I do want to just finish off by saying thank you very much for holding on and listening as well, and really appreciate the questions and the votes. So yeah, if you've got any feedback for us, please do scan the QR code and let us know what you think and what you may like to see as well. Might be able to pass that on to our marketing team for further considerations. And if you have seen anything that you're interested in speaking with us further about, feel free to use the other QR code to get in touch with us, or our emails are also there if you would like to drop us a note. David,
yes,
from your
feel
side?
free. And thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate all the questions. And thanks again for coming to the webinar.